Cool. All right. So I kind of want to get into the topic of optimizing for pipeline of revenue. And I'll give a little context so you and I can kind of go back and forth on this, because I think it's one of these things that a whole bunch of people are talking about right now and have been talking about for obviously a couple of years with respects to how to drive more pipeline and revenue for B2B SaaS companies. And, I think of recent, it's been incredibly important because right now you've got a lot of people getting laid off. You've got everyone doubling down on trying to get efficient on the campaigns that are working. You also have investors that are investing in these B2B SaaS companies that are walking away from the growth at all costs and trying to get more of these B2B SaaS companies profitable. So there's all these kind of things that are stacking up that are leading to this. But then for me, as someone who actually came from a sales background originally and then got into marketing, for me, it's like, well, wait a minute. Wasn't marketing always doing this? Why weren't we doing this? Why weren't we aligned on these same metrics, right? So for me, like I've always been worried about pipeline of revenue. So the idea of like doing that now in a marketing sense seems kind of silly. It's like, what were we doing before? So, but anyway, I wanted to get your take, man. Like, why are people so obsessed with this right now? And like, it's been probably the last 2 or 3 years, I feel like, where it's been more so, especially in the LinkedIn ecosphere, of people talking about why they need to optimize everything for pipeline of revenue. So what's your kind of take on the whole thing?
Yeah, I think my take on why there's such this shift, right? Like obviously, there's a lot of conversation around it. So I think like it's one of those things where once you get like a couple people talking about it, kind of shifts the whole conversation. But it really like goes back to what you talked about, right? Like marketing, I think for a long time, it's like as like the digital age is like kind of like risen and like as it's kind of matured, wasn't always accountable to the metrics that matter, right, and are moving business forward. And that's not to say that every single activity marketing should do should like go straight to a pipeline or a revenue figure, right? Like there are going to be things like these, like, different one-off tactics, whatever it is, that are going to have like micro KPIs that don't map to pipeline or revenue. Right. But I think like the big shift does come from that efficiency aspect. And it comes from, when you have this digital spend or this, paid media spend that a lot of companies have been using and, optimizing for pipeline now, it just goes down to the fact that, the world of impressions and just like saying that's good enough that we're getting eyeballs and having air cover, that's gone, right? And we have to we have to move to an idea where, marketing teams are driving business impact and they're like being like a strategic driver of the business, right? Because with the scale of the internet and of social media, marketing can have a much bigger impact than it used to be able to have too. So like that's, I think, another reason why marketing's kind of really grown in its strategic, focus or, play as part of like a larger leadership team is because, it can have that impact because you have a direct access to your buyers, whether that's on social, whether you're meeting them in search, whether you're meeting them in display, you can have that direct access there. So I think it's a couple of things, but that's kind of where I think of it. What do you think?
Yeah, one of the things that I think is absolutely key is I think all this really stems back to comp plans at the end of the day. And if the comp plan is for a VP of marketing based on the number of leads, and there's some elements to the cost per lead that needs to be generated, which historically has been the way that a lot of it's been. There may have been some other things in terms of OKRs that were set in those goals clearly, but it comes back to comp plans. And if the comp plans are not aligned with the same metrics that sales is aligned with, well, then you have a disalignment immediately with the metrics. And then you're going to have things where marketing then says, okay, cool. Well, if I don't have to worry about pipeline or revenue, and I just have to worry about the number of leads, then I'm going to start to do certain things in order to get the cost per lead down in order to meet lead targets. And I think that's where it starts, right? So if you don't have the right comp plan set up, then everything is going to flow down the hill, right? So that's the biggest thing in terms of why people aren't doing it. The other, I think, big misconception in my book too is that now everyone feels like, and I'm kind of jumping ahead of my agenda here really bit, but it's not like every campaign needs to be directly attributable to pipeline and revenue. It's just not going to happen, especially in situations where you're running, you're optimizing for in-channel consumption, you're running other end-gated pieces of content, and your goal is to get people to consume the content, your message, or be aware of your company. Like, yeah, sure, maybe if there's a click off of it and it's trackable, meaning they accepted the cookies and the pixel fired correctly and all the other bullshit that needs to happen, yeah, sure, maybe you'll have some type of attribution there. But The point is not to obsess over it. Leading indicators are still a real thing, especially in any demand gen play, and we should keep an eye on those. So I think there's always a line between like obsessing over too much, where we might be turning off campaigns too early, for example, and say, now kill that, or even outside of paid. Well, the podcast, I'm not seeing any attributable revenue from that, so that's gone. That Slack community, ain't doing anything, a bunch of conversations, but who cares about that? So there's all these things that could get shut down if we sit there and over obsess about it. It's not to say that the overall inbound trajectory should follow, but I think it kind of comes down to like how do we measure it type of thing.
Yeah, I think it's how do we measure it? And I think, kind of going back to what you talked about with the comp plans, right? Like looking at how people are incentivized, how the org is structured. It's also too, like the request is coming from the leadership team for a reason, and like the investors as well, like where are we efficient and where are we not? Because they're looking at where are they going to place bets, right? Like everybody's been going through budgeting for 2023, and it's a huge thing to be able to know what's working, what's not. Because, if I hear it again, I hear it so often, right? Everyone wants to know, like, where should we double down? Where's the low-hanging fruit?
Yeah. Is it LinkedIn? Is it Google Ads? Is it Bing? What do we do? Where's the $5,000 going to go?
Right. But it's like, like we want to be able to say confidently this channel is working. But to your point, I totally agree. It shouldn't just be at, like, the campaign level. Like, this campaign should drive this many demo requests or trial signups or whatever that, like, leading metric might be at the top of the funnel.
Yeah.
Just because, it's about a blend of looking at individual campaigns where that might be the core focus, and also look at the blend of like the channel level strategy. That's kind of how I see it.
Exactly. I think the thing I always say is like each campaign has different goals, and we all need to remember that. So when you're doing campaign planning, we need to establish upfront before that campaign ever even gets launched, what is the goal and what's the metric that we're trying to influence in this campaign? Because if we start to like gauge everything by either leads, pipeline, or revenue, whatever the metric is, then you could end up turning off a lot of good campaigns, because you and I both know this, right? In a B2B motion, 10,000 plus, ACV, a lot of your cold campaigns, especially on paid social, aren't going to be the things that are all driving directly attributable activities and tons of leads. Many times it's going to happen in the retargeting layer. Once people are warm, they've heard of you, they've been to your website, they started to see some social proof and other things that you've got in that layer, and then they're converting. So you might artificially, say, shit, well, close all the cold campaigns off. Like those aren't doing anything anyway. Let's double down on retargeting. So this is where like, you got to be careful the way I feel like you do this. But let me ask you this to kind of switch directions a little bit.
Sure.
For like, if you were talking to a VP marketer today that maybe is struggling with optimizing pipeline and revenue, do you think there's like some things that maybe we've talked about, maybe we've said it already, but if there's some different things that'd be interesting to go down a path, but things that they need to change internally? We've talked about comp plans, maybe there's some other things, but things they need to change internally in terms of either habits or ways of thinking about running marketing campaigns in order to start driving more pipeline of revenue for the business. There's some like practical things you think that they could do in order to make those changes?
Totally. I think it's like two things, right? Like one is just like, what kind of level of intent are you driving with like the leads you're bringing in from marketing? So you had a great post on this the other day. So I think it's like level of intent. And then, actually I'll start there, right? So it's like, first, like marketing leaders need to evaluate what level of intent of the leads are we driving to our sales team? Like you outlined this beautifully in your post. And so I don't want to butcher the summary, but really, it's like the four different levels. You've got at the top, the high intent that you're looking for. And that's what everyone wants to drive. That's the demo request, the free trial signups that like require sales motion. Those are the things that everybody wants to try and scale, but they're the hardest to scale. Right. Because you are waiting on somebody, like they need to be educated. You have to create that demand or align with it, with that, that prospect, and they have to come to your website and, raise their hand. And so what a lot of like marketing teams, I think, will do is they're not optimizing for the high intent lead. They're optimizing for lower intent leads. So the three biggest low intent leads I see is number one, content downloads. So they're just trying to feed their sales team with content downloads. Number two is they're running an incentivized demo motion, which the unit economics can work. You can get quick inbounds from it, but it's really tough to scale. It's tough to scale as you scale up as a company in different series of funding. So like there's the two types of low intent leads, and then the third one is just like straight demo request leads that they're turned on a lead gen form and trying to get people in. Yeah. And so I think like that's where I'd start, right? Looking at if I'm a VP of marketing and I've got to look at my 2023 goals, and I'm going to be, gold on ops and pipeline.
Hmm.
That's where I would look, right? Like, what are we as a team doing? Because if we're going after a bunch of low intent leads, is there a different way we can provide that for our sales team? Like, one thing that we're doing, working with the sales team now at my current company, is we're helping them to make sure that they have their, pool of cold targets through our contact database. We're using Zoom Info.
Yep.
So they have that always, pooled and prioritized. And then on top of that, what we're trying to do is we're also trying to, make sure we have intent data mapped to the account level, so that, if a sales rep owns the account, they get a trigger saying, hey, your account showed intent, and that can activate their outbound. So that gives them something to prioritize on and allows us to try to focus on, driving more of those high intent hand raisers.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. I mean, yeah, it is about aligning on what type of intent we're trying to drive, but also being cognizant of, you can't just shift everything into, let's just drive more demo requests and gauge every campaign success based on that. You're still going to have other touch points across the journey, and those things need to be thought about. I mean, I think the only thing I'd add to what you said is, in terms of like what needs to change internally inside marketing teams to start aligning with this, is that, outside of comp plans, once those are set and we're aligned on the exact same metrics, we need to make sure also that we've got the right types of campaigns that are actually driving that. So the first thing I'd be doing is looking at, all right, well, for all the campaigns and all the money we've spent on, whether it is some of these low intent leads, like, what is the conversion rate? What does that look like? Let's just take a look at that real quick. And if they are converting, which usually they're not converting that well, then great, let's do more of it. If not, then we need to think about doing something else. And the biggest thing that I always see around any of this stuff is everyone's doubled down so much on focused on low intent types of leads that they have zero campaigns running that are either educating the people on what the product actually does. What does it do? What categories is it associated with? And what are the outcomes it drives? It seems like the biggest miss. There's some people out there that'll drive like, quick, like to your point, like lead gen demo with a little bit of an outcome and things like that. But I'm just talking about getting people to product marketing pages and educating them to like what it actually does. And you'll be surprised. I'm sure you've seen it countless times because you've been in B2B for a long time, is just all these campaigns focused on one thing, retargeting and cold on all of this stuff. And it's like, well, wait a minute, like, great, we're getting lots of email, contacts, but I mean, has anyone actually gone to the website? Has anyone actually explored like what you do, or are they just consuming some of the content that's actually in the ebook or whatever it is? And to me, it's like stuff like that can really start to help once you start thinking about, hey, these are some other campaigns we can actually run and layer on maybe with that gated type of situation, if that's something that's important to the company, and that'll really start to help. But I guess let's get into one thing, because you actually posted about this before, and I think I followed it with another post too, but I think it'd be cool. And there's probably a number of ways to do it, but like how to practically optimize for pipeline. Like, how do you do that? I mean, like, do you go in your CRM and you just look at UTMs and source information and try to understand, okay, these are the campaigns that drove pipeline? Do you send data back up to the ad channel? Do you look at Google Analytics for some signals? Like, how do you do that? When you think about like getting into account and you're trying to figure out, okay, what's leading to pipeline or revenue? Are there some steps that you take or anything technically that you kind of set up, at least at a high level, that would kind of help some folks?
Yeah, sure. I think, I'll start with the CRM and then work my way back to the ad platforms.
Yeah.
So like in the CRM, right? Like say, for example, like I'll look at like the trailing 12 months and look at all the opportunities that were sourced through through marketing and see what was their conversion point, if I have the data available. Now, depending on the stage of startup you're working with, that may or may not be available. Most of the time, if they have a solid operation, it is. But like a really good example that I always try to start with is like on the paid search side. So this is something super practical that I think like every B2B marketing team should be doing regularly, because it really is simple and they can do it. Is just looking at, like, for example, most companies, at least that I work with, run on HubSpot as their full stack. Maybe they do HubSpot Salesforce. But if you've got HubSpot, this is super simple, where you just go in and you look at all opportunities that were sourced. You filter down by paid search and you see, okay, of these, opportunities, what keywords at like the original source drill down to drove pipeline. And then you look in your Google Ads. So you start the CRM, go out to the ad platform, look in Google Ads and see, okay, we know which keywords drove pipeline and how much. So we put that in a spreadsheet. And then now what we need to do is we need to export from Google Ads. What did we spend in Google Ads? And so you might find that you spent $500K in Google Ads and $300K was spent on keywords that never produced a single opportunity.
Yep.
So like that's a key area where it's like you can optimize for pipeline, unlock some existing budget that's already been approved, and you can redeploy that to drive pipeline in paid social with like a different strategy. So like that's like one area I'd start. I'll pause there and see if that aligns with what kind of some strategies you guys run.
100%. That's a big one. The thing that I'd add that we do that really helps is just sending the offline events from HubSpot or you can do it from Salesforce too, directly to the ad platform so that you get the signal and you understand that either whether it's an SQL opportunity, whatever the lifecycle stage you're trying to map to and optimize for, that you can then associate that with the campaign or with the ad group, so on and so forth. And just see that directly in the ad channel. So whoever's managing it from a paid search perspective inside and the nuts and bolts and pushing buttons and stuff like that, they can see those events so that when they're reallocating budget across the campaigns or different ad groups or pausing ad groups out, they don't make the mistake that lots of paid search managers do, which is, oh shit, we've got a really attractive CPA. It's converting like crazy. Let's double down and spend more money on that. And before we do that, it's like, let's see what's actually happening in the CRM. Are we getting the right signals or, again, the data directly in Google Ads itself, and make sure that that's the case, that we should double down on that, because a low CPA, and you know this all too well, right? A really low CPA doesn't necessarily mean that's an attractive CAC or CAC payback down the road. It just means that, yeah, like at the top level, cool. Like it's a cheaper lead than, say, some other campaign. But ultimately, like, yeah, what you said is definitely what we do. Only thing would be like getting offline conversions up into the channel, because it just makes it easier. And you can now do that, which is pretty cool. Sometimes you got to be careful on how you optimize, but LinkedIn now offers the ability to do that as well, which is kind of cool, which, I mean, a little bit late for them, but better late than never, right? So those are some things. And then I think the big thing too, last thing I'd say is, when we're looking at it too, a lot of times we usually have a two dashboard views. If it's a HubSpot client, we'll have one where we've got essentially the paid side of it. So we're looking at usually original and latest source. And we've got a little attribution workflow that's fairly simple, that just kind of tries to take into account some other touches that are happening in the journey. So we're not just, doing first touch, last touch, which is just so limited. And HubSpot's actually pretty good at doing this and looking at some of the other emotions that are happening. So you first kind of split that out, but then you've got another graph on the other side where you're looking at the overall inbound trends. So you're looking at what GTM motion's actually driving that. And you're saying, okay, cool. Like we're seeing an overall increase of inbound overall. And then the question is, all right, what did we do differently that quarter? And then you can start to make some assumptions, and it's never going to be perfect, right? As you know all too well, every marketer, we probably preaches this all day long to their CEO or CFO, even though everyone wants it black and white. It just ain't, but then you can start to see those trends. So those are some things, certainly that we do. There's probably some others out there that do some different stuff.
Yeah, no, I think there's a really good point on that though, Jonathan, that sometimes you do have to take that view where you're looking at just like the overall inbound flow and seeing, even though, because on paid social, this happens all the time, right? Like even if you do self-reported attribution, it is not a silver bullet by any means. It's a good data point, but it's not going to be like the one thing that's going to prove your LinkedIn and Facebook spend. Like it takes more than that. And so, that is one thing where I think, going back to what you talked about at the beginning, or like the question you asked, like how can, that VP of marketing at a Series A startup, start to optimize for pipeline. And I think it starts with just like also just reverse engineering your customer's buying journey. And so as you talked about, where if you have, you go into a CRM and you see stuff that's working, even if it's like, hey, this gated ebook campaign, if it's really working, doing more of that. I think like a lot of stuff, like looking at, okay, we did this quarter because we were aligning with what we heard, over this sample size of customer interviews, this market research survey that we sent to 100 people. Like, I think that's the part that makes a lot of marketers uncomfortable. It can make me uncomfortable too, right? Because it's like 100%. You don't have like that clear straight line attribution that you can go to, your CMO or your, CFO and be like, hey, here's how this came. But I think that that's something I would just add there while we're talking about optimizing.
It's a good point. And it's so tough to like not talk about attribution in any of this always, but it's such a rabbit hole. But clearly like you and I would love nothing more than to have a black and white picture where it just said, this lead, pipeline, and revenue came from this channel. That's it. When we spend $5K, we get $15K back. That's it. That's the math. That'd be so easy. And you could bring that up to a CFO or CEO, and they would triple, quadruple budgets in a heartbeat if you could prove out a case like that. But it just doesn't work that way. And it's just, to me, like what I always will do, I don't know if you do this as well, but I'll always just ask people to walk me through like what you did the last time you bought software, if the person's has bought software. And, they're not going to remember every little thing they did, but I guarantee you it's going to be more than 3 or 4 things. And they're going to walk you through that. And I'm going to say, okay, cool. So now we understand that there's multiple touch points. And I'm like, well, how long did that take? And then, well, I don't know. I was thinking about, I guess, for 2, 3, 4 months or something like that. Finally kind of came back. Sales rep reached out to me or whatever. I saw an ad, whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, cool. So is it reasonable to expect then that when we launch this LinkedIn campaign in the first month or 2, that you're going to expect to see pipeline coming in from LinkedIn, given that you just told me that you already yourself bought software around the same price point? It took you months to actually ultimately buy it. Plus the fact that you didn't immediately just kind of sign up and go talk to sales. There were some things that you did before you even got to that stage. And then it's like the light bulb, I think, goes off in those moments once you just put people in the position. You're just like, oh, I get it. Like this isn't realistic. So that's some things, we always need to keep in mind. I don't know if you'd agree with that.
No, I definitely agree with that. I think what it comes down to for a lot, I think a lot of marketers intuitively understand that. And I think that the challenge is communicating that to other business functions and business executives. And I think what we talked about earlier, or, like the example I shared on like the different levels of intent and, what we're doing in my current organization, where we're making sure the sales team has access to all the contacts for their target accounts, has that intent data. I think it's about when you're presenting that case, right? You're working with the rest of the executive team. So saying here's how we're thinking about marketing. Here's how we're thinking about measuring it. Here's why we've heard this from customers. We're aligning with that approach. I think you have to present alternatives, because what everybody always wants, as you and I both face probably all of the time, is exactly after 1 month, okay, where are the results that we're seeing? Exactly. Even you can have that conversation 30 days prior. Yeah. Hey, walk me through your process. It's like everyone has selective amnesia, and I need to see it now, because it's coming down, right? It's at the board level, it's at the executive level, and then it comes down to the team. So I think it's about having alternatives, saying we have the sales team. They have, contacts and accounts they can prioritize through this database, through intent data. And then, we have this plan, we're measuring it, and we have this program running where we're constantly talking with our customers, through incentivized meetings, or we're sending out these surveys through this third-party platform. It's about having all of that in place so that when that question comes up, you're like, okay, I have this, this, and this until we see this X result that we're optimizing for.
Right. And I mean, to your point, I feel like I'm a parrot sometimes because I just have to say the same thing over and over again. So to your point, before we launch campaigns, I could say, okay, these are our goals.